Welcome to the Sales Acceleration Show. My name is Michael Humblet and I'm the founder of Chaomatic, and this show is all about accelerating your business, so we're going to give you tons of pragmatic advice on sales and marketing. And today we're going to talk about learning. So I invited Loren, who comes from the Netherlands, especially to here. So Loren, explain our viewers what you do, but keep it short and sweet.
I'll try to. No, I'm the founder and CEO of Kowingo, of course, which is a company that helps other companies get their employees learning in a fun way in just a couple of minutes a day, anywhere, anytime, on their mobile device.
It's a SaaS learning platform.
It's a SaaS learning platform, and we use gamification and self-learning AI to do some things in learning that have never been done before.
And just before we started recording, you actually told me a really great quote about the big problem in retail.
Yeah.
Dive straight.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I think one of the other, like a couple weeks back, I was at a big conference with a lot of people in retail, and they were asking this, this big question that they've got, which is, are we going to be disintermediated in some way? Is online going to take over? Will our shops not exist anymore in 10 years?
And they are in decline. Huh?
Yeah, they are in decline. In fact, in the Netherlands, you see a whole bunch that have totally disappeared.
Yeah.
Go in the US right now and try and find a Blockbuster. Also, similarly, huge problems. But the point was, I said, well, actually the people that determine whether or not that's going to happen are likely in this room right now. Because it has everything to do with how you actually train your people, your personnel. Because if I walk into a store to buy, let's say, a television or something, and I realize that the employees you've got there, right, they can't go any further in terms of giving me any information about their product other than something that I could already find on Google in 10 seconds, then you're not going to be there in 10 years anymore.
You see a lot of people Googling. I do the same. I go to a shop and I say, review tuk-tuk, and I
live
compare.
in the store. Really, I mean, 10 years back, the Netherlands was full of all these, IT stores where you could buy a computer and then, buy cameras and some other stuff like that. And I remember so vividly, walking into one of those stores, and I was looking through some hardware, and I see this, this sales guy in the back, and he's talking to what could have been my grandma, and he's telling her that this new graphics card that is in that system will make her Internet Explorer faster. And this was a moment for me where I thought, I cannot believe that these stores will exist anymore in 5 years. And the funny thing is, within 5 years, both of the stores where I had those kinds of experiences, huge chains in the Netherlands, were gone, bankrupt.
So how do you learn? So how should they, I mean, it's a very generic question. So what should they do? Of course they should train them, but how should they do it in a different way than they currently do it?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is to obviously recognize that it is important when you're selling something that you have some amount of knowledge. Because we're already we're starting 1-0 behind, if you will, simply because of the fact that we're so used to, if you need to know something, you can just look it up. So we kind of devaluated knowledge. We went no, you don't need to know anything anymore. You just need to know where to find it. Well, guess what? If you're face to face with a customer, you can't pull out the phone and be like, let me look that up for you, because you're not going to look very smart and educated there.
Sure.
And that's the problem what tends to happen. So what really needs to happen is stage one is sort of recognizing that you do actually need to have some things top of mind. Otherwise, you're never going to be a good sales. And then, stage two is how do you then do that? And that kind of breaks down into, I would say, two factors. Is the first factor is sort of what do you teach people? And the second factor is how. So when you look at the what, typically speaking, a lot of companies make big mistakes in what they're teaching people. They're trying to often reteach them, tasks and rules and jobs and things like that, and do comparatively less in terms of social skills, soft skills, selling skills, things like that, and even less, oftentimes, of things like, telling them what actually the mission and vision of the company is and what kind of cool things you do that you're proud of.
Typically what I see with sales guys, if I just jump to sales, they enter a company and the first thing they're being taught is all the features of the product. I'm saying
exactly, which is cool. You should know that,
but it doesn't matter at first. You need to phone somebody and say, What's the problem?
What do we do here?
Yeah,
like, what was the
exactly.
problem we solved?
Exactly.
A really great story about that is I went to a large company. I won't go into too much detail, but they do part of a manufacturing process, and they have a component that's in almost every factory in the world, and they do something called preventative maintenance on there, and they actually do continuous maintenance on there. So. And that's a really important fabricating component for like any factory around the world. They employ tens of thousands of people. And I was sitting there with their sales director, and I was talking about like, who has the most contact with your customers?
And it's the field services.
And the funny thing is, he said, well, our salespeople, of course. I said, but wait, you said you do continuous service. You have over 6,000 mechanics in plants. Oh yeah, you're right. They spend the most time with our customers. And then I asked them, is like, but what are you doing to teach these people how to sell what you're doing to the customer? He says, no, we're not teaching these people that. They're supposed to, use the wrench and make sure that it's still it's tuned to. So what they're basically teaching these people is, the output of this process is going to be at so many degrees, and that's the correct value. It's within our error tolerance. So I did my job well.
Yeah.
And I said, but wait a minute, you just told me like a couple of hours back that through this continuous maintenance, you're saving per factory several millions of euros every year, or dollars, if you're stateside. I said, so if you simply told your employees that through the maintenance that they're doing, they're saving this factory millions in wasted yield every year, suddenly you'd have a hell of a lot more customers. So that's sort of what you should be teaching people, right? Yeah. Start at the high level.
Yeah. Doesn't that tie in also one of the things I see is that a lot of the knowledge is actually not sitting on top of the company, it's sitting in the bottom of the company, like the technicians going around, they know all the knowledge. So you need to find a way to push it up, actually.
Yeah. This is another thing. Like another similar story. I sat down at some point. We were like at a very large international company. We were like in the US, UK, China, and also in the Netherlands. We were implementing our learning platform for them. And they were going to roll out Kowingo, and they had this issue: who's going to make the content? So I asked them, "Do you have like people that can contribute to this?" They said, "Yes. We have subject matter experts."
Of course.
And he said, well, great, let's have a meeting, bring them in. But the subject matter experts, those were the people from the work floor that actually knew. So the next meeting I sat down with them, they brought 20 of the subject matter experts in. And I just asked them one question. I said, guys, what is it like? What do you do as a subject matter expert? And they kind of looked at me, and then one guy spoke up, and he was like, well, it's basically like this. Once a year I get asked to write a really big document, and it gets thrown on a network drive, and then nobody looks at it.
Classic.
And that's exactly your point. The knowledge is there at the work floor. We're getting them to put it in a document so we can feel it somewhere on the shelf. We did it, but it's nowhere in the heads of our employees. Yeah. And so what we did there is we turned that whole process around, and we said,
chop it in pieces.
Can I screw that? Let's not write that giant pack of paper anymore. How would you like it if instead of writing that giant stack of paper, every month we would ask you to formulate 10 things that all of your colleagues should know?
Yeah.
And just, push them into our system. And those 20 people within like less than a year essentially authored about 2,500 knowledge items that could be distributed to the company. And, the big difference was instead of it being on a shelf, they could see that all their fellow colleagues had seen those items, had learned those items, and actually knew them by heart.
So you kind of blended in with a little game experience that way.
Yeah, exactly. Which kind of,
or how do you?
Well, that kind of taps into the how part, right? Yeah. So the first thing we're doing wrong is obviously we're teaching people the wrong things a lot of the time. So if we would start by simply teaching them the higher values, they would try and figure out for themselves how to do the lower ones, and oftentimes they already know. So that's great, right? And then when you do start teaching them the right things, and you've got that settled, you need to use a proper approach. Yeah. And that's where we're dealing with enormous issues right now. It's kind of where Kowingo came from as a company, is right now the dominant form of learning is sort of traditional e-learning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And And it's terrible. I mean, we literally ended up in sort of this learning domain because you get this fun question like, how did you make this into some kind of overnight success? And you know the common statement, like it takes 5 to 10 years to become an overnight success. Well, it's very simple. We built, based on game technology, the world's most advanced virtual training platform. Then we put it into people's hands. And as we did, we found out that none of them had the base knowledge to even do the tasks that we were training them for. And that's kind of how it that was terrible, of course. So that led us to building Kowingo. And there you suddenly realize, they didn't really know. And why didn't they really know was then, of course, the next question, because we didn't understand, and particularly the managers of those peoples and the experts didn't understand, because we would have training sessions and we'd set these people behind, computers and have them play a game where they did their job, sort of. And then the experts, they would freak out. They'd be like, what's going on here? Why are they doing this? And we'd be like, don't worry, that's why we built this, so they don't make this mistake in real life anymore. And this guy goes, no, Loren, you don't understand. A week ago, we put all these people through a set of lessons where they were taught explicitly never, ever to do this. And now 80% of them are doing that exact thing. I was like, I can't believe it. Like, that's impossible. Show me these lessons. And they took me through their e-learning course. And I literally, I would see this again and again. And I've seen this at so many companies now. On the left-hand side, there's a bunch of theory. And on the right-hand side, there's 3 questions. And I looked from left to right. And I'm like, wait, I know this. I had this in high school. This is what we call comprehensive reading. Like, read the text, check the correct answers, on to the next one. So what you're telling me is, like, for years you've been testing if your employees can do comprehensive reading, and based on their comprehensive reading scores, you've assumed that they know something for years on end? That's terrible. And so that's where the how currently is going very wrong. And that's really because it fails to take into account roughly 4 factors that go into learning. And those 4 factors, I can quickly run you through them. Like, the first one is attention span. We're doing a really horrible job with attention span. I'll give you very simple.
Peak in the beginning, drops immediately.
Yeah. Like the average adult or young adult has an attention span of maybe 15, 20 minutes. And if you're a really great speaker, you can drag people along, and you can take little breaks and have little moments and have little anecdotes and jokes and keep people going. But it's really tough. Even some of the best, university professors get nowhere near getting that done.
Stand-up comedians, they
exactly, if you want to be a great teacher, be a great stand-up comedian, it works amazingly well. But the thing is, that attention span, it's really short, and if you exceed it, most of the material that you're kind of trying to funnel into someone's head, it just doesn't land anymore. And this is so bad that, like, for example, in Finland, they literally cut like 40% of the teaching hours out of, like, their middle school program, and they reduced homework to no more than 10 minutes a day, and all the results went up. That's ridiculous. So in a lot of cases, we're just doing way too much. We're exceeding attention span, and we'd be much better off serving people content in, like, little bite-sized pieces, fitting to their attention span. But of course, that doesn't really work if you're in a classroom, but it can work great if you're, for example, on a mobile device. So that's one of the things we do.
What's number 2? That was one.
Number 2 is matching someone at their capability level. So this is something we know really well in gaming, right? If I were to yank your son off of his Fortnite game, and he said, "And did you learn a lot?" Right? He would laugh in my face because he doesn't associate playing Fortnite with learning, right? But somehow that is exactly what games are, because what we do in games is we perfectly balance your skill level with the level of challenge that we're giving you. And then you get into this magical thing we call flow. And within the flow, learning doesn't feel like learning. It just feels like, oh, I'm overcoming one challenge after the other. And that's amazing. But what do we tend to do in learning, and more in the traditional classroom sense, is we take a whole classroom full of people that are at a completely different level, and we feed them all the same material in the same density with the same difficulty level. So roughly half of them are either falling asleep and sort of occasionally hearing something and then going like, oh no, I already knew this, and then going back to sleep, and the other half may be frustrated, and it's like going over their head, and it's kind of the equivalent of giving a 9-year-old a quantum physics book and going like, good luck, have fun, right? Terrible. So that's the second thing that we're trying to fix there. So whenever you're teaching someone something, you just have to keep in mind, you have to keep in mind the attention span, you got to keep in mind the capability. And those two are just the bare parts you need to make sure that what you're putting in is actually getting absorbed, right? Because that kind of takes us to point 3, because then you're not there yet, right? If you're not doing anything to make them remember later on, then they'll just be like those guys that got that comprehensive reading test. They knew for a couple of minutes, but a week later they forgot over 80% already, and then you did all that effort for nothing. So that's where retention comes in. And well, my simple example for retention is always like this sort of, I can either, if I want to teach you, let's say 5 new things today, I can either repeat all those 5 things 5 times right now with you, right? And then I'll call you up in a week and ask, do you still remember those 5 things, Michael? And you'll remember 1, if you're lucky.
What's your name again?
Damn it. That went quick. But so that's the one end of it. And there's the other strategy I could choose, which takes the same amount of your time, not necessarily of mine, but if I had a computer do it for you, it certainly would. And that's, I'm going to tell you them once now, and then I'll call you up in a couple of days and tell them to you again, and then in a couple of weeks, right? So that's 3, and then a couple months, and then after 6 months, right? And then I'm going to just put down the phone for like a whole year. I'll call you back up. And at that point, you'll know roughly 4 out of 5. So with the same amount of effort on your part, you can either remember 4 things for a year and a half, or 1 thing for a week.
But you spread it out in time.
Exactly. So that's sort of where the magic of that part of learning goes. And then finally, you've got motivation. And well, I don't really need to dig into motivation too deep. You send your kid to to middle school or even primary school, and you'll find out how badly we're dealing with motivation.
Would there be like specific advice for like sales? I have a lot of salespeople that come to me and say, Michael, I'm going to start a new job, and I have a lot of them. Some advice?
So there's so many things so many little things that you can do to really help you. Of course, no matter the way you're offered material, keep in mind, for example, your attention span. Spread the material that you're learning over time. Start early. If you're starting a new job as a sales, the best sales that I see are those people that go and say, oh, I'm starting in 2 weeks. Can you give me all your material? Because good people know it takes time
to go through,
to internalize that material a bit. Right?
So suddenly so weird. I don't feel bad when I say to my girlfriend, no, I'm not going to do it today. I'm going to do it tomorrow because you have a theory for me.
Exactly.
I chop it in pieces.
You're
I'll
just
do it
tomorrow.
Spreading it.
Exactly.
That's no problem.
So now it's education.
Relationship advice.
Yes. Now you can say, well, this is.
There is Loren said. He's an expert.
There's a science behind this. I'm not just doing this because I'm procrastinating. This is better for me.
So always near the end of the interview, I ask my guests some questions.
Sure.
First question is, what would be the best source of information? Where do you get your inspiration? Is it like YouTube, books? Where do you go?
There are so many sources where I get my info, but I think the power of the internet, which is what I grew up with. I started out really young, being able to find all this information.
But is it like one book that made a difference?
No, I would say it's a combination of books. I would say it's not necessarily so much about the source of information that you're going to, because I read books, I watch videos, I read blogs, articles, scientific papers, whatever, like podcasts, anything I need. But the thing is, the difficulty lies not in that you got the exact right source, but the difficulty lies in building a skill set to very quickly interpret the information you're getting, taking the sensible parts out of it and uniting that with sensible parts from other material that you're getting. So it's more assembling it quickly and trying it quickly, putting it into practice, that I think is the most important thing. Typically the people I see stumble either go to one source and go like, it's my religion now, and they will stop growing because they will just do whatever's on paper, right? Or they'll make the other mistake and be like, oh, there's a world of information out there, I still don't know everything, I can't do anything until I've figured everything out. Well, congratulations, if you try to read everything that's available on sales or marketing right now, you will never start a sales or marketing job in your life because there's that much material out there. True. So that would be my tip there.
So how do you say no?
Well, that's a good question. I'm here. I came flying in from the Netherlands on last minute notice.
You're bad at saying no.
So I'm really bad at saying no. I'm getting better over time. I think it's an age thing. But yeah, for me, I'm naturally enthusiastic. So obviously, it's tough to say no. I think probably the best way to get to saying no is to really reflect, take time to reflect, and know what your priorities are. So at least you can kind of compare it to the list and keep yourself honest.
The tricky would be, sometimes I say to people, just don't say yes or no immediately. Say I need to think about it, because then you can send an email saying bad idea. So how do you focus then? Because there's a lot of stuff going on.
Oh yeah.
I know you're really busy running around.
Yeah.
How do you say this is important?
So one of the core things I do for focus tends to be to create time alone. In my case, that works really well. So oftentimes I will come in at the office later than the regular starting hours, and I will have woken up somewhere. I'm a morning person, so I will wake up somewhere around 5 o'clock. And then I have like productive time doing those things that actually need to be done by me, that I need focus time for, without people running into my office every 5 seconds going like, help, there is either, there's not so much on fire, but oftentimes for people when they need something from you, it feels so urgent that it kind of feels like they came running in from a fire.
So what's your biggest mistake? What's the one thing that you think, oh, damn, I should never do it? And I don't want a personal one, a business one.
No, I got a great business mistake. I would say again, probably the biggest business mistakes that I made relate to lack of reflection. I almost always, when I made like a whomper of a business mistake, I think back and I think, damn it, I should have changed directions 3 months ago, if only I took the time to think about it then. So they're usually related to reflection, and I think one of the real whompers that I tell people about that I made is, at one point I helped like form this big research consortium, and we were the biggest corporate partner in it, and we had some like 400,000 euros of subsidies in that consortium. I think 450K or something. And that was reserved for us in the plans, that was ready. And I just got a phone call and I was so busy, and they said, we're looking for more in-kind money. So can we restructure it so that you list all your contributions as in-kind, and we'll just pay you from the funds that come in, and you get the same amount. And me not thinking about the legal side of it too much, because of course now I was suddenly dependent on them actually, living up to that. I was like, well, sure, if that's faster, let's do it, because I didn't have time to think of at least 350,000 euros down the drain instantly in that moment.
So where can we learn more about you and your company?
Well, about me personally, there's LorenRoosendaal.com, where you can see some of the advisory stuff I'm doing, video series I'm recording. I do a lot of public speaking.
Keynotes,
exactly. And then there's of course Kowingo.com, which is
software platform.
Is our SaaS platform. And also recently we launched something really cool, which is yourlearningvalue.com. So that I definitely want to point out. If you're going like, well, I don't know how we're doing on learning.
Compare
right now,
myself to others.
How am I doing? We haven't spent so much time thinking about this, and this is realistic because lots of companies don't necessarily. That has a test you can take like in 30 to 60 seconds, and it'll give you an accurate breakdown on exactly how you're doing on both what you're teaching people and how you're teaching them. So it gives you sort of these points to pay attention to, so you can really start buffing that up and getting the benefits of having your salespeople or your other people actually know what they're doing.
Loren, thanks for coming to the show. I think we've learned a lot. We might want to chop it in pieces so you can come back for next time and we'll learn a lot more. If you like what you've seen, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for a lot more. We are going to add, as we're spreading this across all the channels, we're going to add all the things that Loren has said, all the books and the URLs. We'll put them down in the description. See you next time.